Okay, public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Any public comment? Seeing none, move on. Old business, nothing to report. We're on to new business. 4A, commending Vince Bowers for his 31 years of service for CCWD. Stacy Lawler, HR Manager.
Good morning. We're trying to find our retiree here.
He's hiding.
We can just
Did someone let the cat out of the bag?
Well, he knows.
He knows he's retired.
It's on the, I can assure you that the door didn't that's going out.
If we had a drum roll, it would make a good introduction. Here's Vince.
There's Vince.
Glad to see you dressed up. I was about to make the same comment.
I'm going to read the resolution that we have prepared for Vincent Bowers in regards to recognizing and honoring his employment here at the district. Whereas Vincent Bowers has diligently served the Calaveras County Water District for 31 years, from April 19, 1983 to April 30th, 2014. And whereas during his tenure, Vince Bowers has held several positions, including meter reader, plant operator, mechanic, leadman, maintenance foreman, collection supervisor, construction inspection, senior supervisor, and lastly, construction and inspection manager.
Couldn't find a job that stuck, huh?
We tried everything.
And whereas Vince was instrumental in developing and implementing the collections systems preventative maintenance program, and whereas Vince was responsible for developing the key components of the district's construction and development standards and specifications, and whereas Vincent oversaw numerous construction projects and was the go-to guy for the locations and operations of each detail to the district's utility systems. And whereas Vince has worked with a strong sense of dedication and responsibility to his position, staff, and the customers of the district. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Directors of the Calaveras County Water District hereby commemorate Vincent Bowers' 31 years of service with the district.
Thank you.
So moved.
Appreciate it.
So moved.
Okay, do we have any, we got a motion on this item?
Second.
Got a second? Any public comment?
Any board comment?
Any board comment? Go ahead.
I've been involved with mainline breaks up in Arnold multiple times, basically because it needs to be replaced. But I pay real close attention to staff and the professionalism that Vince has shown. You tell this kind of stuff by how calm they are. I mean, everybody's running around trying to take care of business, and Vince was always there, nice and calm, giving direction, and I really appreciate everything you've done for the district.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thank you very much for your years of service, Vince.
Yep.
Oh, Dennis.
I have such vivid memories when I first got on the board in '89, and they were already building the Vallecito project, which was, in my opinion, terrible engineering, and they had a terrible inspector.
Yeah, they did.
And I was helpless to change any of that, and I have been so pleased to watch you take charge a lot of this, because I know that you don't let anything by, and they can't buffalo you. And I have been very happy to see what you have done, and I'm sorry to lose you, but I wish you the well in your retirement.
Thank you. Yeah, Vince,
I want to, give you my appreciation also. I just think that, the legacy that you leave is one of competency and calmness, and you're direct and frank, and I think you've passed that down to, numbers of our field guys, and I think that that's something that'll stay with this district for many, many years, and it's really one of those things that we look for in management is, what are we going to pass down? What's the legacy they'll leave behind? And I think that we've got a bunch of young guys that have learned so much from you, not just about the technical issues, just about how to handle yourself and how to be professional. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any other comments?
Sure.
Okay, wait a minute,
Oh, we have to-
let's vote on this matter. Make it official. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstain? 5-0, Mona. Congratulations, Vince.
Can I sit in the president's chair?
You can sit down.
Okay, guys.
Tell us when to second on that.
Okay. When I say three, okay. 1, 2, 3. Let's see if it comes out good. Nope.
Pop down.
Let's see if it comes out this time. 1, 2, 3. It's getting dark. I don't know why. And I've got the. Okay, there we go. Let's try this way.
Where's John?
Sorry. Okay.
We're getting an honest opinion.
1, 2, 3. They didn't flash the slide either, did it?
You can sit.
Okay, I just want you to stand here for a while. 1, 2, 3. It came out good, but it's dark. But I can fix it.
Yeah, my grandson's got my whole retirement already figured out for me.
I'm up.
Okay, and moving on, congratulations again, Vince. Okay, item 4A, or actually, should be 4B. Designate district voting representatives at Aqua Spring Conference. Mitch.
This is a pretty straightforward item. Ultimately, we need to designate a voting representative for the district at the Aqua Conference. They're going to change the bylaws. The bylaws include eliminating one standing committee that was previously in place when we had the health benefits program administered by the Aqua. Now that the health benefits program has moved to the JPIA, the elimination of standing committee kind of makes sense. The other one is creation of a business development committee, and that was just to help the district, help Aqua improve its member services arrangement. So the bottom line is we need to designate a voting representative and provide any guidance if it were appropriate.
I'd like to nominate our general manager, and you can eat the lunch.
Okay, we got a motion, any second?
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Any public comment on this item? Okay, any board comment? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0-0.
Good.
And as part of that, matter, do we, okay, no, that's okay, never mind. Moving forward. Item 4C, discussion action regarding district position on SB 1199, McQuallamy River Wild and Scenic Rivers Act designation. Again, Mitch Dion, General Manager.
Well, I'll set it up. Again, this is intended to be more of a workshop where ultimately we have broad discussion with the board and the public, and ultimately the board will be asked to take a position. Ultimately, there's 3 standard positions. One is the support, one is the oppose, and the other is to either support and recommend amendments, or to the hybrid, or to oppose and recommend amendments. So ultimately, those discussion issues should come up as we go through it today. What we've set up for presentations is we have Pete here from the Foothill Conservancy and Catherine they're the advocates behind SB 1199. And then Amador County Water, we have their general manager and board president here to talk about positions for Amador and implications for water supply. So with that, with your permission, sir, I'll introduce Pete, and we will go through the presentation.
Please proceed.
If you grab the nozzle there, you should be able to control the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys, for having us. Some of this is going to be a little bit of repetition of what you saw 2 weeks ago, a week ago. There's been so many meetings jammed in the last couple of weeks, I can't keep track of them. Hey, it works. We've had a long-standing relationship with CCWD. I think you guys know that. We talked about it before. I don't think we need to go into detail on all of that. But what exactly is the purpose of SB 1199? It keeps the river almost exactly as it is today, between Salt Springs and Party River. And as you know, especially the Electra, the Middle Bar stretch is an incredibly popular recreational spot for local citizens. It's just incredibly important for that. Protected area would go from just below Salt Springs Dam to the upper headwaters of Pardee Reservoir. And I know that you put in your report that there's some controversy about that, and I'm getting to that in just a minute. It does not apply to tributaries, other than the fact that if you do something on a tributary that severely diminishes the flow in the river, that's going to be problematic. Otherwise, I know Mitch and I have talked about possibly raising your storage facility on the middle floor. That could certainly go ahead, and there's no reason not to. What will change, there, is there will no longer be a threat of new and larger dams on the river. It will consider water rights as fully allocated. In that context, you have to remember that other than 3 months out of the year and wet years, the Macomb is fully allocated to the river already. A state agency will have to consider the fact that it's wild and scenic when they issue permits. What exactly does that mean? You know, anytime you want to do any kind of construction within a water course, you need a 1600 permit from, I guess it's now Cal Fish and Wildlife. They would have to look at that and say, okay, is this going to damage a wild and scenic river? The odds are it won't, but that's beside the point. It does provide some minor changes in the timber harvest rules right along the river. On the plus side, it can certainly increase property values for those folks wealthy enough to own property on the river. if it's used properly to promote area tourism, and considering some of the folks that are supporting this with us, it certainly would be. It could substantially increase tourism into Calabasas County. What will not change? Existing water rights. Water rights you have, you keep. It does not change that at all. It does not change hydro or water project operations in any way. It does not change land use authority at all. The county now has zoning authority, land use authority. They will continue to have that. It does not exclude any property uses, you know, whether that's grazing, whether that's mining, building houses. You know, a prime example of that is the American River, where it runs through Sacramento, and you go look at all the houses that have been built on the bluffs over the river. That's a wild and scenic river. Both states.
Was it wild and scenic before they built those houses?
Some of the houses preceded, others don't. There has definitely been new construction since it started.
But the majority of it was. When was that American River designated wild and scenic?
Oh, yes, sometime in the 70s. I don't recall exactly. But there are whole developments along that river that were not there
Yeah, okay.
prior to it. It doesn't change any of the recreational uses of the river. It doesn't do anything to affect private property rights. It doesn't do anything to affect management on federal property. And it doesn't do anything to affect access to the river. That's just a couple of responses to your staff report. One of the concerns that we keep hearing is that there is a mechanism to move the state wild and scenic river into the federal wild and scenic river program. That is true. However, in order for that to happen, the Secretary of the Interior must make a finding that the state system is at least as protective of the river as the federal system. The state system was amended in 1982. Originally, it was very similar to the federal system. After 1982, they made it so different that there's no way such a finding could be made. So the only way, even if it's a state river, the only way to make it a federal river is to go through Congress and do it without. Another point that we've heard raised is the import, and that it's somehow tied to the water level in Pardee at a specific date. That was never the intention. Language has been written. It showed up on my computer late yesterday afternoon, but I hadn't had a chance to read it yet. To clarify, the point has always been the high point of Pardee Reservoir as it exists when it's full. That's where the endpoint will be. It's currently, I believe it's referenced to a specific elevation above sea level. Which, and we got that elevation from East Bay Mines, so if they don't have it right, I don't know how we can get it right. It does protect water quality by preventing new dams. Dams do affect water quality, whether you like it or not. We're currently working with Amador County, which I think Art or Gene will talk about a little bit in a minute, to come up with amendments that address their specific concerns about this. We would be more than happy to sit down with you guys and do exactly the same thing. I think the concerns are a lot the same, so what we're working out with AWA is very likely going to raise your comfort level with this. But that's what's going on currently. One of the benefits, it continues river recreation for both locals and tourists, and specifically gives the local tourist industry a real hook to promote Calaveras County. It protects riverside landowners from eminent domain. Okay? If East Bay Mud wanted to raise Part E again, they could go down and just take people's private property. Yeah, they have to pay them for it, but, you know, that doesn't mean much to somebody who's losing their home. It protects traditional cultural uses of the river. One of the things that's very important to our native population, there is a spot down actually next to Part E that would have been inundated where they care for and harvest willows for basket making and several other native plants that they don't talk about much, so I don't know much about. I have been told by local Native Americans that it's also where they take their children to teach them about their language, their culture, and their religion. And there are multiple spots like that. There's only the one designated, but there are a lot of sites just like that that could be inundated. It benefits the fish and wildlife. You know, I forget who it was that said fish don't need water, but they did wrong. Oh. So what are the effects on you guys? The law specifically allows for diversions for local domestic use within designated sectors. There, on the Hill River, I think there's something like 49 diversions that have been allowed to go in. So it happens regularly. It protects you and your water rights from someone on the outside who would like to come in here and build a big dam. Now, I know the slide specifically mentions Westland's Water District. You know, you think about it, and in a little bit, we will talk more about the technical feasibility of building a dam down there. Because you're a small agency, you don't have a ton of money. Even a conglomerate of several small agencies doesn't. But somebody like Westland's that's got billions of dollars lying around and lucrative contracts with giant developers in Southern California, they don't care what it costs. They can come in here and go after the old Devil's Nose project or something even more strenuous. This will protect you from that. It allows you to focus on more affordable, more feasible projects such as those that we're talking about in Mopewise and in the IRWMP that we've been working with you for a long time to help bring to fruition. The California Department of Finance, who were actually proven to be the most accurate predictors of growth in our local counties, project only 18,500 additional residents in Calaveras County between now and 2060. That computes to only 3,700 acre-feet of water. It's pretty minuscule.
You know, Pete, just a comment on that right there. You know, currently in the West End of the county that I represent, that's about what we use for 7,000 residences. out of Hogan Reservoir. We use a little over 4,000 acre feet for the entire Valley Springs, Rancho Calaveras, La Cantera area.
Right.
So it's a pretty significant amount when you think of it. That's our largest population in the county.
Right, it's not an insignificant amount, but compared to the water rights that you have and the options that you have for utilizing that water, it's not a huge population increase. It's well within a reasonable range that you can come up with.
You know, Pete, also on the Department of Finance, it wasn't that many years ago that they said Calaveras County was going to double the population by 2030. So I don't, I'm not disputing your numbers, but I don't put too much involved with what they're talking about there.
Well, they don't have a crystal ball.
No.
I will certainly grant you that.
But what we do have is well, I say we do have, we don't have, but we will have a general plan. And currently, the west end of the county has the potential to grow vastly. And the zoning, and the existing zoning certainly calls for way more residences than that.
And we'll get to that.
Okay.
Actually, we'll get to that right now.
Perfect.
Because if you think about it, and I'm going to pull this map back up here in a minute, and you look at it, yes, the potential growth in Calaveras County is more than likely going to take place in the west end. Where is the most logical place to put a diversion for McCollum River water? Pardee Reservoir.
You are aware that we don't own Pardee?
I am fully aware that you don't own Pardee. But we could actually assist you in obtaining a right to draw water from Pardee. And would be.
I appreciate if you get right on that.
Could you accelerate that just a...
Start that anytime.
Agenda is that.
We can agendize that for our next meeting.
Well, obviously, we're not going to sit here and support a project that nobody knows what it is. But we're certainly willing to work in that vein. We've been working that way with you guys for years. There's no reason we would stop now. And there again is the map. And I know at least some of you are very familiar with the terrain. You think about that terrain, and any project that goes in down there is going to face exactly the problem that AWA has been working for years and finally is able to find a way around, and that's the horrendous cost of pumping water out of that deep canyon. It's just not practical. Certainly not until you get down to Electra. Well, East Bay Mud tried to flood Electra, or parts of Electra, a couple of years ago. When you saw the reaction to that, you guys opposed it too. So there you go.
I don't know, did we take a position on that?
No,
I just didn't support it.
but you certainly did not support it.
I did.
Well,
The board voted not.
I'll just say it right now, I did. I don't support flooding Electra, but I do support expanding Pardee Reservoir downstream. That's where I think is a logical
downstream,
combination.
and that would still be possible.
Yeah.
If you remember, their proposal for raising Pardee was not to literally raise the existing dam. It was to build a new dam, about a half mile, 3/4 of a mile downstream.
No, it was in the same profession, or a little quarter mile downstream.
Yeah, downstream. Even if they were to do that and build it to the same height as what that Pardee is right now, that would give them an additional 33,000 acre feet of storage capacity. This would not affect that at all.
Pete, I've got a question. I just wanted some clarification on a statement you just made. if we were able to get a diversion point out of Pardee, you would help us achieve that?
Potentially, we most certainly would.
I know we've gotten some pushback on the Comanche project that is moving along down there, and I'd really like to see you guys as helpful with our ability to gain water for West County. Do you see yourself as advocates for that?
Possibly. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say we'll support a project that no one's ever seen, but we're not going to be blanket opposed to a project that we've never seen either.
Okay.
You know, it's just like the raised lower bear option. Yeah, we have some concerns about it, but we haven't seen a proposal yet, so it's kind of hard to comment on.
Okay.
So there you are. Aside from diverting from Pardee, you have other options. You can use the existing facilities that are already in the watershed. You can store water in Salt Springs, store water in Lower Bear. Yeah. So why should you support this? And we believe that you should at least support if amended. Your best future water options are not within this reach of the river. Your water rights are protected. All your current use of the river is protected. There are no negative effects on riverside landowners. If anything, their property values are going to increase. And it protects our river from outside interests that have tons of money and may want to come take over.
Pete,
Yes.
what do you see as our water rights?
I'd have to go back and look. I understand that you have rights on the Calaveras River, you have rights on the Stanislaus. Now, how much of that is actual confirmed up water rights and how much of that is state reservations, I'm not certain.
Okay, I'm talking particularly about the McCollum River.
My understanding is that you currently have approximately 20,000 acre feet of state reservation available to you on the McCollum.
Okay, but that's
That's
a
not-
fine nuance from water rights.
I'm sorry?
That's kind of a fine nuance from water right.
Yes, it is. But just because you have a state filing does not guarantee that you can get that as water. It gives you a leg up. But remember that state filing is in the name of Calaveras County, not CCWD. Anyone in Calaveras County can file that. Anyone from outside could also file.
Well, my understanding of water reservation is that it's not much.
No, it's not all.
It means nothing. Pete, one of your earlier slides, you said something about water rights being fully allocated if we got this designation. What do you mean by that? Because there are a number of people who already feel, first of all, that the McCollum River is already over-allocated.
Right.
You mentioned the 20,000 acre feet of reservations that we have that may ultimately be developed into a water right, but how does the concept of allocation figure into those 20,000 acre feet?
Under the state program, the state agencies that deal with water rights have to consider at least this section of the river as fully allocated. Now, what happens upstream or downstream is a whole different ballgame.
But does that have an impact then on our 20,000 acre feet? If they're already making the assumption that we have a river that's already fully allocated, then how will we, as an agency, be able to access that 20,000 acre feet? That's my concern, and I have to say that coming from a position of a water director.
Sure, and I understand. To tell you the truth, with or without wild and scenic designation, I don't know how that would play out. You would have to put together a program to store and utilize that water. Then you would have to convince the state board to give you that, to move that allocation from a state reservation to CCWD and allow you to take that water. Under the current situation that, like you said, there are people who think this river is already over-allocated. There are obviously people who don't believe that.
I'm already operating from the assumption that the 20,000 acre foot reservation that we have is in serious jeopardy. Whether it gets a wild and scenic designation or whether it remains the same. One of the things I want to jump in and mention to you, I think I have a problem with some of your math. You talked about 3,700 acre feet of water for 18,500 people. I think when you do the calculation, it works out to about 2 EFUs, 2 households per acre foot, and we're actually past that now. We're actually doing more. If you calculate it out as an acre foot of water serving 4 people is where we have to go with our conservation, or excuse me, 4 households with the direction that's being required by conservation and things like that. With 3,700 acre feet, you're looking at 14,800 households, and if you do the multiplication, just 3, we're talking about an additional 44,800 people just off of our reservations, potential reservations on the McCollum. And you're right, we have access to water rights in both the Calaveras and the Stanislaus. So I'm not really concerned about the population. It's going to take a long time to get up to 44,000 people.
Absolutely.
But I had some other things, but maybe we probably ought to get on, and then I can come back to ask some other questions as we move forward.
I just want to reiterate that we are perfectly willing to sit down with you guys, just like we've done with AWA. We met with them for what, 2 hours yesterday? We haven't seen any language come out of that yet, but we have seen some concepts for language that could be put in the bill that would solve a lot of their problems with it. We'd be more than happy to do the same thing.
You know, I guess the problem I have, Pete, and I'll just say up front that I'm supportive of this concept of wild and scenic, but I think you put the cart before the horse in this one. The conversation we're having now should have taken place long before this had gone down and had gotten, you know, a bill number and a sponsor and an author and stuff like that. And I think that both Amador Water and Amador County, as well as us, would have probably liked to have been part of the conversation so that some of the concerns and compromises that could have come out of this could have happened before the fact rather than after the fact. I remember Director Davidson a couple of meetings ago making the statement, who heard about this wild and scenic designation going before the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors? I hadn't heard about it until it was fait accompli. And I think the rest of us on the board pretty much reacted in the same way. And one of my great frustrations is I've just spent the last 8+ years trying to work on collaboration between water agencies and environmental groups. And I think that the success of both is going to be found in the collaboration between these two, what at different times seem to be very desperate points of view. And it's not just the process that you've gone in the direction you've taken. I saw the same thing happen on the T-stand, where an environmental agency opposed a study now, not a project, but a study on conjunctive use, just what we're doing with Mokwaz, which I think is a tremendous amount of wisdom in that. If we can utilize groundwater recharge, then we don't have to build surface storage. But the whole point is this, when they opposed it and would not stand aside, that whole concept got trashed. And what happened at the T-stand is they went from a collaborative process to a JPA. And that's the very thing that I remember you and Tom coming into the MAC IRWM and complaining about, the fact that you didn't have the voice that you felt you should have to represent the environmental interests. And this is just another good example of how the lack of collaboration and the lack of communication that could facilitate this process throughout the necessary periods of conversation that have to take place before we even make a decision didn't happen. That's a tremendous amount of frustration to me. Here I am, I'm sunsetting on this board. And as I said, I just put the last 8+ years, that's better than a tenth of my life, into trying to work on this collaboration. And it's just been shined on. And I don't mean, I'm not picking on you because, you know, everybody's guilty. The water agents are guilty, the environmental groups are guilty, and we just need to learn how to work together, and we're not doing that.
All I can say to that, is that we've been talking about this and trying to hold this discussion for 25 years. Okay? You've had 25 years of warning that you're trying to do this. You've known it for a very long time.
The fits and starts always, I'm not aware of it 25. I didn't even live around here 25 years ago, I don't think. But the point I'm getting to is this: if you're going to come up with a new proposal, and this goes with any organization, I don't care who it is, including CCWD, and there are other interests that are outside their specific interest, bring them in. Get involved in the conversation. You know, there's an old adage that says two heads are better than one. In this particular instance, maybe there'd be a lot of confusion, but I do know that this has created a lot of angst among a lot of people, and it's forcing individuals to take positions that I don't think are very smart positions, quite frankly. And I'd really love to have seen this process happen sooner rather than later.
We have been trying for 25 years. This is what it took to get people's attention and take us seriously, because no one did.
I don't.
So if it causes you angst, I'm sorry.
Well, Pete,
We've
I have been
trying for 25 years to hold this conversation.
So you just go ahead and make the decision and then expect to backfill with the other stuff. I didn't know about this, and I've been a friend of yours for a long time.
That's right.
And yet I wasn't aware that this was coming up. I might have been able to suggest some pathways. I may not have. But the fact that I was left out doesn't make me angry. It maybe hurts a little bit. But what I'm concerned about is here we are back in the same retread that we've been dealing with for, as you say, the last 25 years. There has not been a reasonable attempt, from my perspective at least, to really work on the process of communication to make these things work. Because I think there are advantages to both CCWD, Foothill Conservancy, and the economic interests of both of our counties. And that I mean Amador and Calaveras. And yet, not part of that conversation. That frustrates me. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm sorry that it frustrates you. This is what it took to get people's attention to have this conversation. Like I said, we've been trying for years. So here we are.
Pete, to change the subject a little bit, I got a question, see if you had any comment on this bill is authored by Senator Lonnie Hancock out of Oakland, Democrat out of Oakland, and not co-authored and I'm not quite sure what their position is, Senator Berryhill or Assemblyman Bigelow are not a part of the bill, not co-authors. Do you have any comment on that or how that got to be?
It came about because Calaveras County Board of Supervisors asked both of them to sponsor the bill. They got no response. The senator stepped up because there are time limits when these things have to be done in the legislature. And I don't pretend to understand all of those inner workings. But when it got to the point where nothing was happening, and we're up against this deadline, the senator stepped up and introduced the bill.
What do you think the senator from Oakland's interest is?
Protecting the water quality of her constituents.
What about the water quantity?
That's that as well. The quantity that they have now, which they feel is sufficient for a good long time.
That doesn't concern you?
Why should it?
Well, it's, I mean, you put East Bay and Westlands in the same category as being, you know, these big bad people. Yet, you know, you seem to be kind of, you know, in bed with one of them.
No, we're not dead to anyone, except maybe my wife.
That's too much information.
We certainly work with East Bay Light, exactly the way we work with you. From those little bit of contact I've had with Westlands and Metropolitan, there's not been a lot, there's been some. I cannot imagine them cooperating the way you guys do at East Bay Light and Amador Water Agency. That's it. There it is.
I'm sorry. go
No, I was gonna say, I'll have other comments and stuff after. Are there gonna be further presentations, or what's the schedule?
Yes, we have a presentation coming from Gene and Art from Amador Water Agency. When
Maybe if I could clarify a couple things with Pete while he's up there, do you mind? Sure.
No, go ahead.
Again, I want to go back to, you know, the last time we met, you made a couple comments, and you made them again today. What you're basically saying is life on the river as we know it, with the exception of new state oversight of any development or any projects that are within the boundaries of the designation. And there certainly will be new state oversight. So we'll lose a little bit of local control and because of this designation. Is that accurate? I mean, those property owners, while their property values may increase, their freedom's gonna die a little bit, because they're not gonna have the same, you know, local control that they had once before. They'll have new state agencies, Fish and Wildlife oversight. Is that accurate?
Not exactly.
A little bit?
Because anything, any kind of project that you want to put in the river, whether you're a private homeowner, whether you're a water agency like you guys, requires permits from the state. Okay? Now, if you want to put a project in that's going to severely diminish the flows in the river, if it's going to harm the downstream users, the state's not going to give you that permit anyway. So the difference between wild and scenic, whereas, yeah, it's one more thing that they have to consider, but it's not nearly as great as you may think it is.
Okay, so there will be another layer of.
It's not another layer. It's another point that they have to consider in the layer that's already there.
Okay, that's a good enough answer for me. The other thing that, you know, you didn't get on it too much today, and I kind of thank you for it, but I'm going to bring it up anyway, and that's the economic impact of the rafting. Currently, you know, I think you guys, for the most part, they only really get to raft when they let a lot of water out of the hydro facilities above it.
Pretty much.
You know, and so the operation of the river is not going to change. It's the marketing that Wild and Scenic will enhance the economy with.
Right.
It's a marketing tool.
It is a marketing tool, and it is also a preservation tool, because it essentially guarantees that operations on the river will stay as they are.
Now, I'm just curious, if there was a larger dam or a dam that held more water above the Wild and Scenic designation, wouldn't that perhaps enhance the stretch of the river that you're talking about? I mean, because I believe the McCollum would probably go dry in most years if it didn't have the two reservoirs above it.
It certainly went close to it. I'll grant you that.
And then when that happens, the water quality really diminishes, particularly when we talk about, I mean, I think the biggest threat to the McCollum are the leaking septic systems up in that area. I mean, you know, we've all heard about the water quality issues primarily from the landowners that live next to the river and have failing septic systems. I kind of wish we were going after that aspect of this. I mean, I can fully support, and I think that's really where the county should be working. It's their issue, the septic tanks, but I don't want to get too sidetracked, but, so if there was a reservoir above there that would store a little more water, and perhaps we could divert some of that water down below and still enhance the water quality of the river and perhaps the recreation opportunities, that would be, we couldn't do that because we wanted to divert water somewhere in the stretch because of wild and scenic designation.
Well, let me throw in a comment about the California Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. It's no water diversion facility may be constructed on any river included in the system unless the Secretary for Resources determines that the facility is needed to supply domestic water to local residents and that the facility will not adversely affect the river's free-flowing condition and natural character. So there definitely would be another layer, more red tape for any diversion or project in or around the river, and taking into account both of those, with the and, not the or, it would have to be, it would have to.
It does look like it's adding another layer. The reality is, all of the other regulations that apply on the river, whether it's 1,600 permits, whatever, or 401 water quality certifications, all fall under the Secretary of Resources. With this, just like anything else, he's going to delegate it to staff, like he does all of that stuff. That's the way the system works. So it's not another level of regulation, it's just one more point in the regulation that currently exists. One more point to be considered.
Pete, on the two sentences that he just read, I'm puzzled because it talks about the natural flow of the river. The reality is whatever PG&E lets out of Salt Springs is what determines what the flow is going to be, and that's mainly fish flow, environmental flow.
What PG&E lets out into the river, and it's not just from Salt Springs, although that's a portion of it, is determined by their FERC license. The FERC license was absorbed by reference the settlement agreement that we spent a year working on. You guys had, I believe, had the opportunity to be part of that. I know AWA did, and so did Denver County, and they chose not to. The flow schedule that was developed through that program was our very best attempt to mimic what the natural flow in the river would have been were there not a project there.
So it mimics it, but that isn't a natural flow in terms of it's flooding or it's dry. It's just whatever the FERC determines is going to be coming down the river.
Now, that all depends on how you define natural flowing.
Thank you.
Bob? Yeah, several things. The one thing that we haven't considered is the fact that the Wild and Scenic does indeed give us support in the sense that it does eliminate outside interests. And I have to put to the history of the foothills and Sierra counties, and as it was once described, we've been pretty much like a colonial economy in the sense that people have come, taken our resources away, and given us nothing back, which is one of the reasons we're in the potential condition we're in today. We don't have any say over what the flows in the rivers, any of our rivers are. We don't get any money back from any of the logging that takes place, or very little. The resources that we have been utilized and benefited lots and lots of other people. And I do see that there's a certain advantage to this Wild and Scenic, and I just want to make that as a point. Another point that I want to make, as a matter of fact, to my knowledge, the North Fork has never dried up. I believe in the 1930s, the South Fork dried up twice in 3 years. the talk about any impoundments that we have would be on the middle and the south fork as opposed to the main fork, and that's basically wholly within Calaveras County. And I keep looking at the issue of diversions and thinking about the experience that Amador Water had, and the reason they wanted to get that gravity supply line in place is the fact that the McCallum Canyon is so deep that the cost of energy to take out the minimal amount of water that we're talking about now for our purposes would be almost prohibitively expensive, and we'd be much, much better off creating a relationship with East Bay Mud or some other place where we can do diversions. And there are lots of opportunities for diversions in the powerhouse areas that you've talked about. So I don't see the diversion issue as anything of any consequence. The one question I had I've never gotten answered, and you may or may not be able to answer this, Pete, is there is associated with all of the major reservoirs in the state of California, and this is probably a federal requirement. Do you know what the dam inundation line is for the North Fork of the McCallum? The dam inundation line. There's a line beneath which you cannot have any construction and or impacts to the flow. And the whole concept is if there's a catastrophic failure, you're going to have a body of water coming down from, say, Salt Springs or possibly Upper Bear, and that's going to take out everything within a certain level above the normal flow level of the river. And I've seen it on the Calaveras, and it's probably in some instances as high as 40 feet. Whether or not, downstream from Salt Springs that would be an impact or not, but knowing that's a very narrow canyon, that probably would have an impact all the way down to Pardee. But I don't know the answer to that question.
I don't know the specific answer to your question. I know that probably been 6 or 8 years ago when PG&E was doing some rather extensive repair work on Salt Springs. And all of a sudden, there were rumors going around that Salt Springs might catastrophically fail. There were articles in the newspaper about how people should stay away from the river and all of this stuff, which was totally unfounded. But that's beside the point. I just don't really know how to answer that question.
Okay, well, and of course, I can ask the question, but I don't have any answers in it either. I want to go back to your first slide, which you said keeps the river as is. Now, how are you defining as is? Because that's, depending upon who's interpreting that, it can mean different things. It can mean natural flows, it can mean the actual watershed basin itself and the surrounding area that's part of the McCallum Canyon. So I'd like to know your definition.
It keeps the river as it is now. The river, okay, not the watershed. We still have a lot of work to do in the rest of the watershed. There's no question about that. State wild and scenic status only affects the riverbed itself up to the first line of permanent vegetation. It's not like the federal system where there was this quarter mile on either side of the river and all that. That doesn't exist anymore.
Okay. That answers, thank you.
Just one final comment, I keep going back to, everything that we've talked about is how hard it is to do anything. And, there's so much oversight. The reason we don't have, bigger, better facilities is they're super, super expensive. They take time, they're so time consuming. And from our side, we have groups like yourself that many times are helpful, but also many times will take any designation and oppose anything that's growth inducing or feel as would be growth inducing. So we have a lot of groups like that constantly oppose us all the way downstream anytime that we even start to consider a project. And that will be true with or without this designation. So I think when I look at obstacles of what we may want to do, and we're all sitting here talking in the now. We were formed in the 40s. And they probably really had no idea what they were looking out for in the future, but they generally, this board did a pretty darn good job of preserving us enough water rights to enjoy the quality of life that we have today. And make no mistake, our quality of life in Calvert County is almost completely dependent on our water resources. I mean, the communities that we have right now, we would not have if we did not develop those water resources. And our future is dependent on those water resources. My comment is, I think any project that we do in the future, and I'm talking will be long dead, but any project that somebody does in the future is going to be heavily regulated. And we live in the state of California where everything is, I believe, overly regulated. So I don't think that there should be a fear when water agencies are talking about, well, gosh, maybe 50 years from now, we need to have a secondary water supply. That's what my biggest interest is protecting future water supply for the west end of the county who are my constituents. I certainly don't want my legacy to be the one that just said, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. That's a board of 50 years in the future. That's their problem. And so that's where I'm reluctant. But don't you feel that there's going to be significant oversight of any project anyway without this designation? Or do you think it's so critical that all the environmental regulation, all the federal regulation, all the state regulation that we will have to overcome and mitigate if there is a future project, you don't feel that there's enough there today to protect the river?
I do not believe that ironclad, yes, there's none. What I do know is you guys have multiple options of where you get water in the future. We only have one, McCollum River. We don't have any other options. You're trying to protect your multiple options. We're trying to protect our own options. That's what it comes down to.
Any other comment from the board?
Pete's going to hang around and be available to answer further questions, so if we can step forward, we'll hear from our neighboring agency, a neighboring upcountry agency, and one of our core values is to make sure we're supportive of those upcountry neighboring agencies. So with that.
Yeah, I have a number of comments to make, but I'm going to hold off until the end of the presentations.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break here before Gene steps up to the mic, and we'll go from there. Okay, mics are on, and let's continue with our presentation. Gene?
Good morning, Board President and members of the board, staff, and audience. My name is Gene Mancebo, General Manager for the Amherst Water Agency. My purpose for being here today really is to share some of the concerns that the Water Agency has on Senate Bill 1199. Our board has taken a position of opposing the bill. Likewise, the Amherst County Board of Supervisors and Jackson Valley Irrigation District have all taken a position of opposing. The bill was a gut amend, I think as most everyone is aware. And because of that, there's been very little time to take note of what's in the bill, the specifics, how it affects us. In fact, today, the Senate committee staff is putting together oppose and support information in preparation for a hearing for April 29th. Just again, how quickly this is moving along. The Water Agency's focus is on water supply and water quality. We do not get into land use, so our focus is fairly narrow. And so with that kind of will come out in some of the concerns that I'll bring forward. The Water Agency is concerned that this may provide a hindrance or perhaps even prohibit the ability for us to move forward with some critical future supply projects. In the near term, the water agency currently has a pending water right application where we're moving water right from below the proposed wild and scenic area to an area above that. And that's currently in a pending mode. We're concerned that this may create a problem as we modify flow that would otherwise be going down the area and the stretches of the wild and scenic. In addition to this project, we're also concerned with our ability to develop additional water safe use. We're looking at perhaps maybe 10,000 acre feet of the project. This could be raising Lower Bear, could be Salt Springs. In either case, any of these projects that then are above the wild scenic designation, how does that affect the free-flowing characteristics? Does that cause some type of a flow characteristics or an impact into that wild scenic that might hinder or prohibit our ability to move that forward? And our water agency doesn't really have any other option. 97% of our water comes from the Columbia River. A very small amount comes from wells. The development of wells is really impractical from our standpoint. It's not reliable. The Consumers River, one of the only undammed rivers in the state, and it doesn't have much of a watershed behind it. It just doesn't really appear to be a viable option for us. And the Columbia River is our primary option, and perhaps our only reliable, high-quality source of water for our community. The water agency's also become ever so aware of the impacts of drought. How does that affect our current ability to store water and the reservoirs that we use in water, and whether or not there's a need for additional storage, and how that snowfall occurs, how much, when, and the flows in the river. All elements of concern of the water agency as we move forward, and how the wild scenic designation may have an impact for those. The water agency has collaborated with CCWD in a study and looking at Lower Bear. And that concept, I think, is still out there, and looking at a water supply project. There's some concerns as to, as I mentioned earlier, how this may have an impact on such a potential project. We don't have the details of that project. We just don't want there to be an obstacle that would prevent that from going forward. There was some discussion today about CCWD's water right reservation. And the concept to be able to put that reservation into actual a water diversion and a water right will require changing a water right, will require a project to move forward before you would actually see the fruit of such a project. And certainly this is something for your attorney, but my perspective on it is that once in place, that would have a priority of 1927. That means that water right, when perfected, would be ahead of Comanche and the water right that East Bay Mud has. It would be post-RD, but ahead of Comanche. So it is a significant and very important component that Calaveras County has, and something that needs to be protected, preserved, for at least when you can move forward. Within some of the existing language of the water resource codes, and I think portions of that has been read today, there is the ability with the Secretary of Natural Resources to allow under certain conditions diversion of water and wild scenic designation. To take note it's domestic use. It does not mention agricultural uses. That's something too that should be weighed and considered. Water agency staff and for direction of the board is working with the our goal at the moment is that to achieve some type of a language that we can bring back to our board that might be acceptable make changes to that bill that would preserve and not hinder our ability to try to develop future water supplies, nor to hinder our ability to shore up our existing perennials, or our ability to move water rights up to a different point on the river and utilize that for our benefit. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions.
When you talk about moving your water rights upriver, are you talking about utilizing your future gravity supply line as the water conveyance system to eliminate the Tiger Creek diversion?
Not precisely. The gravity supply line project can go forward with or without the relocation of that particular water right. But we, in our upcountry area, the COP, the Highway 88 corridor, we were pushing up against our existing water right. And so we, Amador County is part of the, actually the